Dan Hook from Hook Outdoors here, and this is another episode of Get Outdoors with Hook Outdoors, and I am pleased to be joined today by Tom Timmerman and Scott Barrett from the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources here, and we are going to talk about primarily the muskie here at Cave Run Lake and all that entails. And I'm going to let them kindly introduce themselves here for a second, and then we'll just get right on into getting some questions answered. So Tom, if you want to go first there.
Sure. My name's Tom Timmerman. I'm a fisheries biologist with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, and run the district office here in the Northeastern Fishery District. I started back in 2007 and had the pleasure of working under Luke Corman and Fred House for several years, and then when Fred retired, kind of moved up there. So, quickly learned that muskie is one of the keys to this lake and one of the good things we got going here. And so got a quick crash course there from Lou. Who's probably no better person to get a crash course from.
Right.
Yeah, been loving it ever since.
Okay, awesome. Scott?
My name's Scott Barrett. I've been with the department since 2007 as a fisheries biologist, and I work down at the fish hatchery, which we're both in the same building, but I do more of the hatchery related stuff, and I'm there and kind of responsible for part of the team that's responsible for producing a lot of the fish that go across your state. So
okay.
And
well, I guess my first question is, do you guys know why Cave Run was, established as a muskie lake? I mean, I know it was because they were native to the river, but was there more to it than that and so forth?
I don't know if there was necessarily anything more to it than that. The northeastern part of the state, be it the Licking, Tigris, Kinney, Little Sandy, Kentucky River, Green River, all those are native muskie streams. And when they decided to build this lake here, it just kind of made sense to keep maintaining it as that muskie fishery. So.
And that's a question I had. It seems like this northeastern quadrant of the state and over into West Virginia, muskie is a thriving species. It seems to be. Is that just a geographical elevation, or is there a reason behind all that?
Well, I mean, the muskie was native here, so I mean, species grew up, they evolved, they got to living here a long time ago, and just adjusted to those climates and those sorts of things. And I think that's one of the reasons. Another reason is we're fairly unimpacted.
Right.
I mean, if you talk about easy places to till up land and plant corn, that's not easy to do here. So,
no.
We maintain some of that naturalness that those fish learn to have. Okay. So.
Well, what makes Cave Run basically one of the premier muskie fisheries in this area anyway?
Yeah, if I could put a dot on it, I wish I could.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything necessarily that I know of, that I'm aware of, that sets this lake apart. A lot of times, what it comes down to is just the biotic and the abiotic characteristics of that lake just set up right for it. That's one of the reasons why Cumberland is such a good striper fishery, and maybe Cave Run wouldn't be. It's just our water chemistry. Those abiotic factors really play into it a lot.
I was just curious if it has to do with the structure or the depth, water temp, that kind of thing. I didn't know if that played a part in it. I didn't know if there was, the oxygenation level in this water here happens to be just a little bit better than there is maybe in other places.
If anything, I would say that woody structure that they left in the lake, when they first impounded the lake, obviously anybody that's been on Cave Run knows there's an inordinate amount of woody structure that was left on this lake specifically for fishing and fish cover, and those muskies love that stuff. And if anything, I'd say that helped more than most other things.
Okay. Well, Scott, since you work down at the hatchery, can you walk us through kind of the process of from whenever you get whatever information from higher up that, like, hey, we need this many muskie to go to Cave Run or whatever, what's the process? Just basically from beginning to end there.
Okay, we usually have an annual production meeting in November, actually, of the year previous to the production year. That's when all the districts, they put in their request for the upcoming year, and a lot of those stay the same from year to year.
Right.
We have changes that we that we want to make from time to time, but with our muskie, typically, like our reservoirs like Cave Run, it's been pretty consistent at the stocking rate, and so we know ballpark what we need, and we'll start collecting brood fish in February if it's pretty, and through March, and all those come from the tailwater down below the dam. We usually take around 30 fish, and we'll hold those fish until the first part of April. And then we've got an oxbow there on the hatchery that we can hold them in. It has adequate amount of forage if they need to eat, and first part of April we'll go when temperatures start warming up. That's usually when we spawn our fish, and we'll go in our oxbow. We will electro fish those out of the oxbow, and at that point we'll inject them with carp pituitary, and we'll hold them in 1 acre ponds. And typically 48 hours post injection, we inject both the males and females, and they'll begin to release their eggs. And we'll start checking them 48 hours later. We want a warming trend in the water, so we try to stay away. If it's given like the weather we've had, we would have bailed out on that, but when the temperatures are warming, muskie go in the mid to upper 50s, and when we got those warming temperatures, that usually helps with them. And as far as releasing their eggs, we'll go in, we'll start checking them, and if they're flowing, we'll take them up to the building and strip spawn those fish, and then we'll take them and put them back in a pond and hold them for a period of time, and then they typically end up going back into the river. This year it was a really good year. We took right at 2 million muskie eggs. And several of them have hatched already, and we're sitting waiting on them to swim up now. They'll lay there kind of lifeless, and they'll move a little bit. They don't even look like fish at this point. They kind of look more like a larval salamander or something. They're living off their yolk. And after a week or so, depending on water temperature, they'll slowly absorb that yolk, and you'll walk in one morning and they swim up. They'll all be up, and they go straight on zooplankton, and they're ready for minnow fry from that point.
Now, those eggs there, are those like being raised in the building, or do you put those back in a pond?
Those are in the building. We have jars that we keep the eggs in. We keep water flowing through them to keep them oxygenated. Eggs are just like fish. They need fresh water flowing over them, and that way we can treat them to keep fungus and other things down. And then, once the fry swim up, they're ready to go to their ponds. We have minnows already started in those ponds, so they get their first spawn off, because those little muskie will move on to freshly hatched fathead minnows in just a matter of days when they're stocked. So, then we just keep pouring the minnows to them. And
now, what's the cycle time from the time that they're hatched there and in the jars? I guess, what's the growth rate?
From April, the first part of April, when we actually spawn the fish, from egg to the end of October, you're looking at 13 egg to 13-inch muskie, which is what's stocked in our reservoirs.
So that's why the fall stocking, that's the growth.
Yeah, we try to get them as big as we possibly can to ensure the bigger the fish, typically the better their survival chances are.
Now, once they go to the pond and they get past and they get big enough where they're starting to eat, is that why you raise all the goldfish down there?
We raise goldfish as well. The first part of their life, we don't have enough ponds to grow enough food for them, so what we do, we actually contract minnows from Arkansas, and I get a load of minnows every week. So and it's pretty expensive and kind of labor intensive. We have to divvy those minnows out amongst the ponds to ensure that they've got all the food they want to eat to maximize that growth. And typically July, they're 8 inches by July, and at that point we'll go in. We'll do a lot of our stream stockings with the 8-inchers, and we'll reduce our stocking or density in our ponds, and we'll restock those 8-inchers at a lower density to get them on up to 13, and then we'll take those out later in the fall for Cave Run, Green River, Buckhorn, Dewey, some of our reservoirs that we stock.
So all the fish that are raised here, they stay in the state?
Well, Typically,
Okay.
a lot of them do.
Right.
We do share fish.
Right.
As state agencies, we're pretty good about, you know, if we've got extra of something or
Right.
trading fish, for example.
Sure.
Tennessee, they get they've gotten a lot of their muskie from us over the years.
Okay.
We get in exchange, we get our striped bass fry from Tennessee. So
okay.
it's a really good, it's a good
deal.
relationship. It's a really good deal for Tennessee. In the past, we've done, I know West Virginia's taken muskie fry from us, and then also, not in the last couple years, but we were shipping eggs to Ohio. Ohio was coming down and getting muskie eggs, and taking those and hatching those to get a little jump on their growing season, because they ran a couple 3 weeks behind us, and they wanted some to hatch and kind of get going earlier than when their females were ready. So.
Okay. Well, now we've kind of talked about the process, and I guess Tom is. I guess, are you more involved in the decision making as far as like whenever people start putting in requests, and you start looking at data and analyzing that data and trying to figure out numbers? I mean, is that what kind of your end of it?
Yes. So go ahead.
And I was just curious how you arrive at what numbers go where and that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, basically once they leave the hatchery and they hit the wild, they're on us.
Right.
So the hatchery does a real good job of raising the fish, and they put a lot of effort into it, so we want to make sure that they fish end up being the best that they can. But yeah, several responsibilities that our office has. We're the ones that maintain the long-term data sets on any fish species,
Sure.
crappie, bass, muskie for cave run. And based on some of those long-term data sets and kind of what we see from, obviously angler catch and angler request is going to go in there, but at that point we'll recommend different size limits and different regulations.
Right.
And then also through a lot of trial and error with the muskie program, and I'm talking going back to the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, sure,
trial
yeah.
and error.
Yeah.
Is where we came up with one fish for every 3 acres on our reservoir.
Okay.
So, and I think it's really important, that link there between the muskie, the hatchery, and the wild is super important. And I think this gets glossed over a lot with the public, that there is no reproduction of muskie in this lake.
No, that's now anyone, from what I've talked to, any of these guides that fish here all the time, from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the fish go through, I guess, the motions.
Absolutely.
But there's not an actual spawn.
Right.
So they have all the characteristics, but no.
That's right.
No action.
That's right. So we're kind of talking about two different subspecies here of muskie. The northern subspecies is sort of a more lake-based subspecies. Those
Right.
fish can spawn and reproduce successfully in the lakes. Our southern species is a river fish.
Right.
And obviously that's not going to do real well in a lake situation.
No.
And one of the things that Scott had talked about was that continuous fresh water flowing over those eggs.
Right.
And that's really what we're missing in the wild, is that fresh water keeping. I think Rod told me once that even just a tiny fraction of dirt on top of those eggs would smother them out. And that's just not able to happen in
Right.
hatcheries. So really, we have the hatchery in the wild. So really, we have the hatchery to thank for the muskie fishery here.
Sure. What kind of data are you looking at whenever, like he was talking how they'll have a couple of million eggs or a couple million fry to start out with, and you're going to have so many fish come from that's actually that you can put in the water. How do you, what do you base your decisions on as far as like, if you decide you're going to put so many hundred or so many thousand fish in Cave Run or Green River, whatever? How do you do that?
Yeah, so like I said, this was a lot of trial and error. So back in the 70s and 80s, they were stocking smaller fish and a lot more numbers.
Right.
And that wasn't necessarily so successful. So then they went to a slightly larger fish and those bigger numbers. And, then later on down the road, those fish weren't quite as heavy as we wanted them to be. And
right.
So it was just really through a lot of trial and error that we ended up at that one for every 3 acre. And that's kind of been our standard now. In the reservoirs.
So that's kind of a standard number year after year. Like
Yes.
for Cave Run's 8,000 acres, so you put
2,700 every
2,700
year.
fish every year, and that's just kind of locked in. And same with green, and do you stock like Tiger and Kenny Kinnick and those creeks?
Yes.
And how do you arrive at that number?
Sure. So going back, again, back in the 70s and 80s, those guys did a lot of work.
Yeah.
But they did a lot of shocking surveys. And I remember Lou and Fred telling me a lot about sampling streams like Tigers front to back, the entire stream.
Yeah, they did.
And would go through and they would calculate the number of fish that they had caught. And then they'd go back through and they'd look at those abiotic characteristics, the depth, the flow rates, where the pools were, how big the pools were. And it was through that they were able to say, okay, historically, prior to us really doing anything, this stream's holding X number of fish. And so, that's where we arrived at those stream numbers. And I think the streams are stocked at 1 for every 2 acres of muskie habitat. I'm looking at Scott to see if that's right.
That sounds about right, yeah.
So it's a little different stocking rate there.
Okay. Well, that's fascinating. I've always wondered about that because I've heard, and I'm assuming those are natural fish, but up in the Sayersville area, and do you guys ever stock Red River? Because I've heard of fish over there, but do you ever go that far up, like past West Liberty and up through there? So
Red River gets stocked, as well as the Kentucky River, and it's a trib. The Red runs into the Kentucky there, so you get a lot of fish shooting up it. It's one of the bigger, in the upper Kentucky, it's a pretty good sized tributary runs in there, so you get some of those fish there in the main stem of the river. You're going to shoot up through there as well.
Right. What's the life cycle, or I guess the life cycle of a muskie? How many years would an average adult muskie be if it just lived and died of natural causes, I guess?
That state record fish that Sarah Terry caught a couple years ago was 14 years old.
14 years old.
And that was pretty much the life expectancy. That was the oldest known age fish that we've ever caught. And again, talk about the difference north to south. Up north you're talking about 20, maybe even more years. So our fish are living a lot shorter lives. They're growing a lot faster down there too. So.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed being here day to day is with the structure or the reef program that you guys have had going on down there, the more than just an uptick, the increase in the quality of the crappie fishing here. Has that made a difference in the muskie fishing? It seems to have to me, but is there any data on that as far as?
Not directly. I mean, unfortunately, due to some restrictions for other recreational uses on the lake, we weren't able to put our habitat as shallow probably as we would have liked.
Sure.
But I have heard reports of anglers catching bass, crappie, and muskie. Those are 3 big fish, all off of those structures.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I don't think they're going to go right away to that bushy stuff like crappie like. But once that stuff breaks down a little bit, I think that's pretty good habitat. And frankly, just listening to Scott talk about the number of fish that these guys are getting fed in the hatchery, if there's bait fish on those brush piles, there's going to be a muskie there. It's like me lining up at a buffet.
And I guess that's another thing as far as the forage here for the muskie. Can you all give any idea? I mean, is there a good number of shad and bait fish in this lake? Compared to other bodies of water, do you all have the numbers for that?
I don't have the numbers.
Or not the numbers, but I mean just an opinion.
Good feeling on that, yeah. We don't have as good a shad production as other lakes. Our fertility here in the east is definitely a lot lower than it is in the western part of the state.
Sure.
It just is what it is.
Yeah.
For that reason, we don't have as good of a shad population. But the thing that makes muskie opportunistic concerning what shad we do have is that the shad will escape the feeding ability of a bass pretty quick.
Right.
And once that shad hits 10 inches or whatever it is, at that point it's prime food for a muskie.
Oh yeah.
And a bass really isn't going to try to choke something like that down.
Sure.
So for what there is, we do pretty well. And again, that gets back to just making sure you're stocking the appropriate number of fish in the body of water you have.
Is the grass a benefit or a detriment to these muskie? And to the fish in general? I mean, personally, where I've lived here all my life, I see an improvement over the years in just the fishing, the number of fish, quality of fish. But I was just curious. Is grass good or is grass bad?
Well, that's sort of a loaded question.
Sure,
I'm gonna tiptoe around it a little bit.
Yeah.
Definitely, there are types of weeds that are better than others.
Oh, sure.
And that goes for 1,000 different reasons. But from an angling perspective, and I'm not quite as good of an angler as my buddy Scott here is, but seems like those ambush points and those that weed edge habitat would be advantageous for anglers, for muskie to find that prey source.
Does it help with water quality?
I wouldn't necessarily think it helps or hurts.
Okay. What do you think about this, Scott? I mean, are you?
It's definitely structure that will hold some fish, but again, it depends on the type of vegetation. Because what you run into with some of these invasive species that get started, if you see some of the pictures and some of the things the lakes got just absolutely choked out, and what happens with that, you have it's absolutely just, that's all it is. Like hydrilla, for example, and that's something we want to. That's why we kind of tiptoe around the grass. We don't want that because that would hurt everyone if it was just solid. But your native stuff is great. It holds fish, provides shade, oxygen. It's great cover, great habitat.
Well, there's different people that's been wanting me to ask this question. I've seen these Facebook posts and all like that. What do you guys think about the way people they're proposing to want to take the size limit here to 40 inches? Is that good or bad, or is that not such a big deal? Or
it's definitely been a great discussion. We've seen those Facebook posts and stuff like that.
Sure.
Too.
Yeah.
And Frankfurt, is aware of those posts as well.
Yeah. Anybody with the internet be aware of those Facebook posts.
We take a look at, with any regulation. We're reviewing those regulations every year based on some of our sampling data that we collect. So whether it's bass size limit or crappie or muskie, we're looking at them every year, and definitely angler input goes into making those decisions that we make. The truth of the matter is, as far as the muskie population goes in the lake, and what the anglers are catching, is that they're not harvesting fish.
Right.
So it seems to me, for a size limit, a more restrictive size limit, to be super effective, they'd have to be harvesting quite a bit of fish. And
right.
I actually pulled some of those numbers this morning. Overall, our harvest rate in 2019 was 2%. That's tiny. And when you look at other species like channel catfish up near 70%, bluegill at 40%, those numbers are tiny.
Right.
Of fish that are coming out of the lake. So, I don't necessarily think it would help. I don't necessarily think it would hurt either.
Yeah.
And another kind of anecdotal thing about the 2019 fishing year and the crib data that we have on that was that anglers didn't actually start harvesting fish until 40 inches. So anglers are kind of, and speaking broadly,
right, I get it. Yeah.
Anglers are kind of setting themselves up already at that self-imposed 40-inch minimum. So, but it is a discussion that we have, that we're having, that we have every year.
Yeah.
And hopefully, as soon as we know something, the anglers will know something.
Yeah, because born and raised here, my mom and dad built this place in '74, and it was a different time then. People kept what they caught. They ate what they caught. We had a rack out in front here, had a bunch of hooks on it, and that was back when it was a 30-inch size limit, daily possession of 4, and there's a ton of Polaroids around with 2 guys standing there and 8 fish hanging there, and I'm glad people don't keep them at that rate now.
Right.
And it's the same thing you hear with these with the bass guys. The reason. The way I understand it is the reason you have the slot is you want these smaller fish kept because it's going to stunt the herd, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And it's a polarizing issue. You've got one side of the group that just don't keep anything, throw everything back. Go to Captain D's and get your fish if you're hungry. And then you've got another group. Well, if I'm fishing, if I can get it and it's legal, I'm going to take it.
It's polarized. I wouldn't say it's polarizing on our end, but that's the tough aspect from our end, is that we speak for both of those anglers.
Yeah, and one bunch is going to be upset with you
no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, it just puts you. And being in business like this, I have to kind of, I have to watch where I'm at with it too, because I'm going to wind up, if I'm not careful, I'll wind up making somebody mad. But I just try to deal in numbers and facts and everything, and that's what I was curious about. If going to that 40-inch limit would be detrimental to the fish population.
I don't think it would be detrimental at all. I think it kind of already. I think it would formally put in place what's already sort of happening out there.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, folks buy a fishing license whether they have an intent to harvest or don't have an intent to harvest. As long as they're abiding by those rules, you know, they're in place to protect the fishery the best we can.
Are there any, you know, of course, we're an inland body of water, and there's no kind of lock or anything like that here, you know, and like they have other issues in other lakes with invasive species and stuff. Is there any threats as far as like anything that could happen here that would be detrimental to this fishery?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just curious about that. I know like there's, I guess like this weed growth could get to be an issue, and you know, or somebody could turn some of these stupid carp loose and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, it seems like our waters are sort of under siege every day.
Right.
You know, it wasn't 2 or 3 weeks ago we got notification that there were pet stores were selling these small moss balls. They're basically just green balls of algae, and inside those moss balls they were finding zebra mussels. And when people got tired of these things in their home aquariums or whatever, they'd throw them in the public lakes, which happens.
Yeah.
And now, boom, all of a sudden we have zebra mussels in the lake, which isn't something that we want.
No, man, that was a big deal here a few years ago.
Yeah. So I mean, it's constant. You know, that's why we urge people to wash their boats, rinse their boats, inspect their boats, keep them dry if you can. You know, if you're leaving Cave Run and you have the intent to go fish another lake, just take a couple days off. You know, let that boat dry out a little bit.
And you know, from what I've seen here, a lot of people, if they're busy at the ramp, they'll pull over here. But a lot of people are pretty good about wiping their boats and stuff down. Of course, they don't realize about the whole zebra mussel thing, but you know, offhand, by what they're doing, they're mitigating that without knowing that they're doing it. So that's a good thing.
Well, you know, there's a lot of discussions there to be had with the general public about, you know, being sure to clean your boats. You know, look in the little tiny nooks and crannies that you would normally think of. You know, all those little nooks and crannies around the motor mount. You know, if that holds, you know, hydrilla, for example. You know, one fragment of hydrilla has a 50% chance survival.
Well, that's how it got started here.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
somebody just brought it in, either knowingly or unknowingly, but that's how it got here.
Right. So, I mean, you have somebody that leaves it on their boat, doesn't know it, goes and drops in Taylorsville, you know, down in central Kentucky, and boom, now you've got a problem down there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's important to have those discussions with folks, and then also important to have discussions about, listen, if you're tired of your pet in your aquarium, you know, your goldfish or whatever, don't release it in public waters. You know, that's silly. You have the potential to cause some severe ecological damage by doing
Well, just like, of course, the climate here is too cold for it, but just with the snake issue they're having in South Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal, what they got going on down there. I mean, that is a big issue.
And these are real life problems. I mean, we see goldfish, you know, all the time in the wild. We've seen pacu, which are an aquarium fish in this lake, right in Scotts Creek, right across the road.
Really?
Yes. So these things happen. We just need to be smart and have these honest discussions with folks. You know, if you're tired of something, you know, come up, try to give it away.
Right, and give it away.
Better to do with it.
Yeah. Well, I got a couple man-eating hamsters. If anybody's interested, they've chewed me up. And you know, Scott, you're the angler here. As far as like some characteristics of muskie, you know, is there certain things that they're more sensitive to, or less, like the light, or you know, colors, water temps? You know, I've noticed like here, if they've got a pretty big hard pull, you know, a big discharge, it just really locks them up here.
Yeah, it kind of messes with things when they're pulling hard. It kind of messes with a lot of our fish, you know, up in the lake.
I mean, why is that? You would think that wouldn't really be a big issue for them, but it does.
To me, stability is good, you know, but if you have on, off, that really screws things up as far as fishing goes, in my opinion. But a lot of the factors you mentioned are going to play a role, you know, as far as color, shade. Shade's one of the things that my personal thoughts, I think I'll fish like some shade.
Right.
You know, it's a really kind of underutilized bit of cover that you kind of need to pay attention to when you're fishing, and even if it's the back edge of a weed line, you know, the back side of whatever, you know, dock, whatever you're looking at, you know. As far as colors go, I I like to, unless the water's muddy, I like something nice and natural looking. You know, blacks, whites, silvers.
Sure.
Muddy water, chartreuse, fire tiger. My you know that Miller Perch is my muddy water color. I really like that. You know,
sure.
that I've had a lot of luck on that, but. You know, just you got to read the conditions and what's going on as far as making your choices, and that's, you know, there's no one thing I think that's the right answer to what you need as far as a color or whatever. And to me, the big one's confidence.
Right.
It's what you got confidence in. You know,
Yeah.
you got confidence in what you're throwing. You feel good. You feel good about getting bit, so you fish it a little better. I think so.
Seems like too, if you're beating your head against the wall, you shouldn't keep beating your head against the wall. So
Right,
it's not
and
working for you.
you know, and me, I know a lot of guys like to throw the big stuff, and that's great for big fish. I like to catch fish. I oftentimes downsize.
Right.
You know, I know you hear it all the time. Guys out bass fishing and just popping off crankbaits to muskie like crazy. You know, don't be afraid to throw something a little smaller, even if you're out there muskie fishing. So,
do you have even an estimate on what the population number is in Cave Run right now? I mean, I know that's hard. I mean, it's a 50-year-old lake and all like that. But I mean, is there any kind of numbers out there?
That's a lot of tough math to figure that out. Actually, we've had some internal discussions about some few studies that would specifically target that sort of a number out there. So hopefully folks can stay tuned and get a pretty good guess on that. But not, as of right now, no.
I know you guys are doing a lot of shocking right now.
Yep.
As far as like Cave Run goes, and this doesn't even have to be a musky question, what's a typical spring shock turn up as far as like, you know, is there a bigger number of like smallmouth in here than what people realize? Because, you know, there's a few caught along, but, you know, on one hand I hear people say, oh, well, there's a lot more in here than you think, and I mean, is there, and then on the other hand you hear people say, oh, well, there's not any bass in this lake and all like that, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people that catch a lot of fish. Yeah.
Well, we've been at Grayson this week.
Sure.
Shocking up at Grayson. I think Monday night we handled probably close to 600 or 700 fish.
Yeah.
Tuesday night was a little bit lower, and last night, of course, post cold front there was not quite as good as the first night. But you know, as far as bass go, we may collect over 1,000. You know, bass in just a couple, 2 or 3 nights. Sometimes up as close to 2,000. Muskie, obviously not quite that high. You know, a couple hundred muskie would be a good trip for us. With, you know, a good week for us as far as muskie goes. But you know, in terms of catchable size fish, you know, so fish that anglers are actually going to be targeting. You know, I think our numbers can be pretty similar.
Right.
You know, what we see in terms of fish over, you know, 12 inches, you know, the smallmouth question, you know, all those sorts of things is going to be pretty similar to what anglers are going to be catching. What is a little bit tricky is that anglers aren't catching those small fish.
Right.
You know, I mean, it would be absurd to think that with a 10-inch worm you're going to catch a 5-inch bass. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's where the majority of the fish come from, and that's also where the majority of the controversy about the slot limit and those sorts of things come from, because that's not necessarily what bass anglers are fishing for.
No.
But with the electricity, we catch those, and we catch buckets and buckets.
And a lot of them, your electro fishing, I mean, you're fishing at the depths that these guys are fishing at for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, we do shoreline electro fishing. It's about 6 to 10 feet deep, depending on water conditions.
Do y'all ever shock a fish up that's just like, man, that's a big fish? Like, I mean, have you seen some like big fish out here?
Yeah, I mean, you learn it, and I know Scott spends a lot of time on the river, and it's sort of one of those things that, you know, electro fishing is really cool the first several times you do it, and then it sort of gets mundane. But then every once in a while,
you'll get that one fish.
There'll be that one fish that comes up, and it's like, holy Lord, where did that thing come from? And a couple years ago, me and Justin Heflin's, our assistant biologist, were on the front of the boat in Beaver Creek, and we caught a fish, a muskie, that was 5 pounds off the state record.
Wow.
And I think they had to check our drawers after because I mean, we came up and we knew it was special. And we actually got it in the boat and got it weighed, and it was something else. So
you ever see any big bass out here?
Oh yeah.
Really? Good deal. Good deal.
I think I've seen 4 over 50 in the spillway down here in the Licking River over my time collecting brood fish.
Wow.
Biggest was 53 and 53 and a little bit of change. My board was.
I wondered when you were talking about collecting them for the spawn. I didn't know if you guys just kept them in that.
No, oh no.
Or so y'all.
What we do when we sedate those fish, it's a thing called MS222.
Right.
And it's mandated that we hold those for a certain period of time, and until in case someone were to catch them and they decide to harvest that fish, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we hold those fish, and then they all go back to the river after we're done with them. So we're not holding any fish. So you know, we get a lot of folks. They see us taking fish, and they kind of, man, they're taking their fish out. But you know, we're not taking that many, and they all go back.
Yeah.
And you know, if you want more, that's kind of the game you got to play. I mean, we're taking them temporary. We're just borrowing them.
That's
you know.
What they have to realize. I mean, you know, I mean, you're not wanting to kill them. I mean, you're just trying to make the population.
Absolutely.
Of those 1 million or 2 million eggs that you guys get going, how many of them actually turn into fish that get stocked?
A lot of the 2 million that we take, a lot of those eggs, they're in the spawning process and stuff. We'll lose them. They're damaged. They end up dying, and we keep cleaning them up, and we'll end up stocking. I think our rates for the ponds are around 9,000 or 10,000 fry per pond that we do, and we usually do 5, 6, 7, 1 acre ponds. So we don't use that many of them. We don't need a whole lot of them. So the surplus typically go into the Licking River.
Right.
So the fry we don't use to stock our ponds unless someone else wants them or needs them in another state. They go into the Licking River. That's where the surplus goes.
And of those fry that go in those ponds, how many of those reach that? What'd you say, 13 inches?
Yeah.
How many of those actually reach
It depends. It's variable. It's basically, it's kind of farming. A lot of conditions play roles, and there's certain years survival's really good, and we got fish out our ears, and don't have places to put them all. And then other years we're scrapping around, and it's tougher. But in the last several years it's been good. We've met our numbers, and if we have a few extra, again, other states and stuff come into play, and then the other biologists make decisions if they have somewhere they want to put a few extra, if they don't want to, whatever they want to do. But those fish will go somewhere, where they're going to be utilized for sure. But
we definitely have an idea where we want surplus to go.
Yeah, right.
Do you see? Is there any changes on the horizon as far as is there anything that's improvement-wise or anything as far as Cave Run or any of these lakes that we serve, that you guys serve around here? Are there more of these habitat programs out there or structure programs and things
across
like
the state? Cave Run was sort of launched, the habitat project on Cave Run was sort of launched as a model program for the state. That ended up turning into a whole branch of folks that are based out of the Frankfurt office that go across the state. I think they're on Barron River in Western Kentucky right now, and they assist us. We're constantly refreshing habitat. My guys, Chad, Justin, they're habitat fiends. They anytime they see something, they're wanting to put it in the lake and build stuff to put in the lake. So we're trying to keep up with that right now. That's our big thing.
Now, are they looking? Can people donate stuff for them to dump in? I know they do the Christmas trees and stuff, but is there other things that they're willing to accept, like pallets and even?
So I don't want pallets.
Okay, I get that.
There's a lot of questions about the environmental safety with pallets, so I'm trying to steer clear of those now. But the big thing that if folks have would be larger trees, larger cedar trees.
Okay.
If they have 10 foot, something that 2 or 3 guys can handle, by themselves. Cedar trees, that's really good habitat initially for crappie, and then as it breaks down for bass and for muskie. So we'll take all of that anybody's got. But give us a call down there at the hatchery. We're still working kind of remote hours, so they'll put you in touch with my email probably, and we can discuss it from there. But
I guess it'd be a big no-no now, but now this was back in the mid '80s. There was a bunch of these locals got on a big kick, and they were out there. They were sinking rocks and concrete blocks and everything, and it even went so far as they were buying old these old tri-hole runabouts and stripping them all out and everything and taking them out there and sinking them. I know where like 2 are right now. That's probably a big no-no at this point, I would imagine.
Yeah, our first job is to protect the resource and the fish, obviously, that are in that resource.
Yeah.
And so we steer away from stuff like that.
But that is the one program that I can see. I mean, I know there's a ton of things that the department does but just that I've seen firsthand, because I've seen the amount of work that was put into it, and I've saw the results from it over the last few years. But the habitat program, I mean, that's the real deal. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
The stocking and stuff and all that that's unsung, really. Nobody really thinks about it. They don't realize the effort that goes into, when they start getting those fish out of the river. That is something that's visible, because, nobody notices the department fish truck when it passes by here at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
When it's still dark and it runs up to a ramp and dumps the fish in. Nobody pays any attention to that.
Well, we kind of do that intentionally too, because we don't want to interrupt people's fishing day. Honestly, if I come by with a shocking boat and somebody's been out there fishing the first day that is able to get out with their kid in months and months,
and you're just busting them,
they're going to get ticked off at me. So we do try to stay out of the public's way, and to the benefit of the public, but kind of to the detriment of us too.
Good deal. And I guess has COVID? Of course, we're hopefully on the tail end of it now, but did it? I guess it had an effect on kind of the ways you guys conducted business, as far as getting out and being able to just get even your daily task accomplished and that kind of thing.
Yeah, initially, there was some worries about, because when we do our shocking, when we do our sampling, you put 3 people on a boat, and that's 3 people from 3 different households in real close proximity to each other, handling the same div nets, and we're basically swapping terms like crazy.
Oh,
but
sure.
So initially, it affected us, and we had to come up with some new ways to go about our sampling and be safe about that sort of thing, and that's on my end. And the lucky part of my job is that I'm either in the field or in the office. If I'm in the office, I'm on the computer. So if I've got a computer, I'm able to work from home. So I was able to do that. Now the hatchery's been completely different situation.
Yeah, it threw us a little bit behind last year. For example, muskie production, when COVID hit, we had just finished up with walleye production, so we produced walleye last year, but it prohibited us from doing any muskie last year. And then we went later and looked for some naturally flowing fish, but that didn't. We found a couple, but they didn't, limited success. But so muskie production last year was null and void kind of. So as well as largemouth bass, we didn't do any largemouth bass last year, and I think crappie was on the production list, and we didn't do for some other lakes, not Cave Run, but it was a no-go for us last year. So this year we're up and running and hitting on all cylinders. So everything's looking good so far. So we'll probably be harvesting walleye here in a couple weeks.
Well, fellas, we're about to wrap it up here. Is there anything either y'all want to add to this, especially in regards to the muskie fishing and to that end on anything that's just anything to do with muskie fishing and what you guys provide for it?
Yeah, I would just say, enjoy it. There's a lot of effort that goes into what's produced, a lot of behind the scenes stuff.
Right.
The things that the hatchery does as far as raising the fish down there are truly special. I mean, to think that this fishery just lies solely on those shoulders is impressive. And once things open up and the building opens back up down there, I would urge any diehard muskie angler to go down there. One April day and try to watch it, because it's special. It really is. But beyond that, just keep in mind when you're out there, our goal is to make your experience the best we can. And our door is open. If you have questions and comments, don't hesitate to email me or call me. We can have those discussions, and that's fine if we disagree on things. That's part of life, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So that's me on my end.
Yeah, it's it's a great resource, and we're here for the anglers, and we're all typically all licensed buyers, and we just want everybody to have as positive and as good of experience on the water as they possibly can,
Right.
despite your views or whatever you believe in. Just respect one another and enjoy the resource and do your best to take care of it in whatever lawful way that may be. Just follow the rules, and enjoy and have fun and get outside.
I would also urge anybody, I get several calls from folks about, well, so-and-so's keeping illegal fish and those sorts of things. If you see something, say something.
Well, yeah.
There's the 1-800 poacher number, call that number. Somebody will be there. If not there that day, if you can't see them, just trust the process. They are there. They're behind the scenes. They're working. They care about their resources as much as we do. So if you see something, say something.
All right, folks, so that's going to wrap it up here, and as we always like to say, just go fishing and get outdoors with Hook Outdoors. Thank you, gentlemen.